As we get going, here are a few important things to keep in mind. This meeting will be recorded and later transcribed. The transcript will become part of the official public record. Providing a comment here tonight constitutes your consent for your name to appear on the official transcript for the public record. Those of you who attended any of the previous public meetings will see some of the same content as before. However, it's important that we provide the information for any attendees who have not seen or heard this material before. The primary purpose of this meeting is twofold. First, we want to bring visibility of the program to you by providing an overview of our approach to the program development and an overview of program requirements as outlined in the published interim final regulations. This includes clarifications to the interim final regulations based on some concerns expressed in the first several public meetings. Second is to ask for your comments on the regulations.
That I don't have your trust, and I will have to work very hard to earn it. I understood the situation as I came into the role of Director of the Hermit's Half Canyon Claims Office, just days after the legislation passed back on September 30th. But I am here because I care about your recovery. And we have an opportunity together to build and design a program that meets your needs. I'm in this role because I have a couple of decades worth of experience building and managing federal programs. And I know that I don't know you and your unique culture and all of the issues that we will need to address together that are unique to this area. What I have done, though, is spend much of my time in this role so far listening and learning, and I will continue to do so. And I don't plan to do this alone. I've started and will continue to build a team with a priority on hiring local, bringing in the right expertise, and putting offices right here in Las Vegas, Mora County, and Santa Fe. We expect these offices will open in February. In fact, the one in Mora very, very soon. We conducted 2 very successful local hiring events in December, and we're conducting another right here in Mora this Tuesday, January 10th. I will be including a couple of key roles in the office who will all be hired locally. It's important to me that we tap into local experience and expertise and familiarity with New Mexico law. First, we will be hiring navigators who will be engaging with you directly to walk you through the process. The Deputy Director and the Claims Chief will be hired locally. In addition, I've established a Hermit's Peak advocate role who will report to me directly, separate from our claims team, and will work to resolve issues on your behalf and provide feedback and recommendations to me and report on those publicly. Involved in the claims process. Notifying the claims office that you've had a loss related to the fire, submitting to the claims office proof of the loss, and receiving payment from the claims office for the loss. We're here today to get your input so you're part of the process in developing these steps. Details of these general steps are still being developed. However, all of the steps have time frames that are required by the regulations. We will discuss each of these general steps in more detail in the following slides. Full capacity. The Hermit's Half Canyon Claims Office is expected to be fully operational early this year. And don't worry, there's no rush to complete this form. You will have until November 14th, 2024 to file a notice of loss form. Losses will we cover? The claims office will review each claim based on its unique facts and merits. You should not assume that an injury resulting from the fire is not allowable simply because the regulation fails to address it specifically. Losses may include personal property, business, financial losses, personal injury, including reasonable out-of-pocket treatment costs for mental health conditions resulting. Loss of property. Compensation may be awarded for an uninsured or underinsured property loss, a decrease in the value of real property, damage to physical infrastructure, loss of subsistence, cost of reforestation or revegetation not covered by any other federal program, and any other loss determined to be appropriate for inclusion as a loss of property. We would first like to acknowledge that the process for evaluating and reimbursing claimants for tree loss is one of the primary concerns for many residents in the affected area. We understand that trees are critical to the livelihood, businesses, and culture for many of those impacted. Before addressing the issue of tree loss under the interim final rule, we would first like to directly address the conception that all forms of loss incurred from the Hermit's Peak fire may be capped at 25%. This is not the case. As it pertains to tree loss, the Hermit's Peak interim final rule states that payment for revegetation and reforestation will not exceed 25% of the value of the land plus any structures on the land. This does not apply to business losses for timber, crops, and any other natural resource. However, we do recognize that the language in the rule that addresses the reimbursement for tree loss was taken from the Cerro Grande regulation. We understand that this language may need to be changed to reflect the unique characteristics of the affected area for the Hermit's Peak fire. The interim final rule provides one way to value the landscaping aspect of vegetation and trees, but we are exploring various ways to ensure that we can provide for the full value of loss and reforestation associated with trees. It is our intention to design the Hermit's Peak Fire Claims Office process so that all losses, including tree loss, will be addressed fairly and equitably. This is why the public comment period is critical, so that we can receive feedback from the public as to what changes need to be made. Compensation may be awarded for damages to tangible assets or inventory, including timber, crops, and other natural resources, business interruption losses, overhead costs, employee wages for work not performed, loss of business net income, and any other loss determined to be appropriate for inclusion as a business loss. Financial loss. Compensation may be awarded for increased mortgage interest costs, insurance deductibles, temporary living or relocation expenses, lost wages or personal income, emergency staffing expenses, debris removal and other cleanup costs, costs of reasonable heightened risk reduction, and premiums for flood insurance. On flood insurance, given the increased flood risk with the ground charred and unable to absorb water, having a flood insurance policy is vital. Until vegetation is restored, which can take 5 years or more after a wildfire, flood insurance will protect your home when flooding occurs. For more information on flood insurance and how to purchase it, visit floodsmart.gov, and we can help you with that once our offices are open. Notifying the claims office that you've had a loss related to the fire. Submitting to the claims office proof of the loss, and receiving payment from the claims office for the loss. We're here today to get your input so you're part of the process in developing these steps. Details of these general steps are still being developed. However, all of the steps have time frames that are required by the regulations. We will assist in preparation of the claim. This includes assistance in understanding and filling out the proof of loss form. We will also have adjusters and experts available to help the claimant determine the value of the loss. A claimant may amend the notice of loss to include additional claims at any time before signing a proof of loss, or add any additional losses during the 2-year window to submit a claim.
Para ayudar al solicitante a determinar el valor de su pérdida. Un solicitante podrá modificar su notificación de pérdida para incluir reclamaciones adicionales en cualquier momento antes de que firme el comprobante de pérdida. También puede agregar cualquier daño adicional durante el periodo de 2 años para que presente su reclamación.
What if you incur costs for completing the proof of loss? We will reimburse claimants for the reasonable costs they incur in providing documentation, as well as the reasonable costs they incur in providing appraisals or other third-party opinions that we request. We will not reimburse claimants for the cost of appraisals or other third-party opinions that we do not request.
¿Qué sucede si incurro en gastos para completar?
Thanks, everybody. We're now going to begin the public comment part of the meeting. If you signed up to speak before the meeting, we'll call your name and bring a microphone to you. We have a microphone on this side, and over on this side, and I'll provide the third mic. When it's your turn to provide a comment, please identify yourself and speak directly into the microphone, and we'll be using a timer to keep on track. As a reminder, people will not be responding to comments during the meeting. We do request that you limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and since so many of you signed up in advance, this will be especially important. If you no longer wish to provide a comment, please just indicate so. And if time allows, we'll provide the opportunity for others to speak once all who signed up in advance have spoken.
Ok. El señor José Aragón.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Emilio Aragón. I was thinking as a general comment that we need a central clearing kind of local around the area for victim input, because we get a lot of double messages. At one point I was told to send in receipts and for my loss. I did, and I get a phone call 5 days later telling me, don't send forms. No reason, but so we need somebody that can tell us the right route. I was told I was number 3 on the list for assistance. What list? And that was 3 months ago, since 2 engineers from Louisiana, FEMA engineers, came to my site. I was cleaning up, because we hadn't had any cleanup, And that's when they made the comment. Well, what list in number 3 for 3 months? Anyway. We may be having too many meetings and it taxes us. Because here we are trying to rehab our communities, our area, our sites, and all these meetings take a toll. Under the question of what types of losses, I lost the 63 Studebaker that I had. It's a classic for my grandson. We were going to put the engine on it that I've already acquired, and the tranny. Well, that burnt. Do we have driveway rehab? I'm up a hill in Cañón de Maneritas, and it was affected quite a bit, especially by the floods. Not the fires, but the floods afterwards got big ruts in it, and anyway, that type driveway rehab. I also lost a newly published book, 40 copies of Bullied by Privilege that I had just received from my publisher for distribution. And do we get that?
This is, the time is over, but if you have time, we can come back for other comments. Thank you. Joe Lobo?
Thank you. My name is Joe Lovell. I'm an attorney. I represent numerous individuals, businesses, entities, and associations who've been harmed by this fire. I'm here. First, I'd like to commend you on your reevaluation of the arbitrary cap on tree replacement. But I'm going to use my time to talk about Section 296.31, reimbursement of claim expenses, which you limit to only those requested by the claims office. Yet the statute and the rules also place on all of these people the burden of providing the record, developing the record, and also the burden of proof, and yet empowering yourselves, the party without the burden of proof, to determine what proof these people can use. All right? There's a name for that. It's called conflict of interest. The rest of us, we cannot engage in a conflict of interest, but your rules allow FEMA to do so. There will be a necessity for third-party opinions. Your own rules set various limitations that are tied to market value, which, of necessity, require a third-party opinion. In addition, there are all of the things that have costs. The question ultimately is, how much will it cost to rebuild? How much will it cost to put in new culverts? How much will it cost to reroute a river? All of those things are costs that will require third-party opinions. And yet, once the notice of loss is filed, then the claimant has 150 days and can only then obtain opinions during that short window of time if and when you give them the permission to do so. That is also arbitrary and unfair. An example would be a client I have that is a water association whose infrastructure was largely destroyed. Their spring was silted in. They were required right then to determine the cost of fixing this, as well as the cost of drilling a new well. They have to know that cost. Whether they make a claim or not, they have to know the cost. They also have to know that cost to make a claim. And yet, you say that the work they do the expense they incur in doing that and preparing the claim cannot be compensated unless and until you decide to allow them to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Romano? Barbara Bustos?
Hello, my name is Theodore Bustos, and on what types of losses will be covered. My question is, we need to know what other federal programs cover the cost of reforestation or revegetation.
Thank you. Roger Romano?
My name is Roger Romero. My question is, we have 2 years to get this right, if that's the time limit. And 2 years is not enough time because simply, especially with the flooding, it's going to continue for quite a few more years than that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly or Jenny Powell?
Hello, my name is Kelly Powell. I live on Highway 434 in Mora County. I see a lot of debris cleanup and cleaning all the dirt and debris from the flooding and all that. I don't see anybody's home being replaced. This is kind of upsetting. We're spending all this money for cleaning up dirt alongside the road, but there's no homes being replaced. I think that's really discouraging, and I think you should focus on all that. Anyway, that's my wife.
My name is Jeannie Powell, and most people around here consider me a pain in the butt. But I'm going to introduce you to our community. We are a group of people that are multicultural, multi-religion. Most people here have property that has been handed down from generation to generation back to the beginnings of the land grants. A lot of these people have raised their families in 1 or 2 bedroom homes with 6 or 7 children. And they've done it very successfully. We've had Rhodes Scholars come from our community. We've had doctors, nurses, lawyers, and we've also had homemakers, our loggers. Everybody in this community is essential. Everything in this community is essential, but it has been wiped out. Our logging, our firewood for next year is non-existent because no more trees are growing. The year after that, it's going to be worse. The year after that, it's going to be worse. With the cost of fuels in the area, our area cannot afford propane and electricity to heat our homes without that wood supplement. Our forested areas are trashed. So these are concerns that we have, or at least I have, for our community. There are people that I've talked to, elderly people, and a lot of these people don't have the worldly education that everybody else has outside of the big bad world, that know how to apply for assistance, et cetera, et cetera. I know when we submitted claims for just our evacuation, we were told we can't be helped because we had our own camper. You know, these are the things that these people, they're still little old ladies that are living with their children, their aunts, their other relatives because they don't have a home anymore. And the process is not understood by them and how to apply. I don't see anybody outreaching to the community, going down that tax line and say, do you need our help? I haven't seen any of that. You come to us, and then we'll tell you whether or not we can do something. And most people have been turned away at least twice. Oh, well, try again, and they might help you a third time. Try again, and they might help you a fourth. But this is our community.
Sherry Morrison?
Hello, my name is Sherry Quintero Morrison, and I'm not from here, I'm from Santa Fe. but a lot of my friends live in Rosiada, in Las Vegas, in Mora, Angel Fire, and they've been all affected. 3 of my friends lost their houses and all the buildings on their property. And I feel for them. And there are a couple of things that I'm concerned about. Is one, what about the future income? Say, for instance, from the rancher that grows Christmas trees. Okay, this year he couldn't cut any Christmas trees. What about next year and what about the year after? This needs to be brought up. Also, regarding your arbitration, are those arbitrators going to be from New Mexico, impartial, but they need to be aware, as this lady said over here, of the culture, the livelihood, the history, the importance of this generation that lives here in this valley. So bringing an arbitrator from the east is not a good idea. They need to be from New Mexico. The other thing I would recommend is if you're going to have the process of processing the claims, if there's a way on the computer that the claimant can go and look at the process of where their claim is. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Varela?
Hey everybody, my name is Kathy Varela, and I want to talk about this trust issue. Bless your heart, sweetie, for taking this on. You said that you know that you don't have our trust, and yet, how can you, when we've all had experiences with FEMA, and it hasn't gone well? So you're asking us right now, trust us, in the final moment, is you're going to make payout, trust us. And then you use words like to earn it, reasonable available sources. The claims office may determine. You're the sole person who's going to tell us what we're worth. That's not trust. Trust is when I can go to get outside sources and sit down and say, how much to replace my well? Trust. It's a little bit too late. Meet our needs. Do you know what our needs are? And then we have to prove, after everything burned in the fire when we're locked out, how many of us were allowed back in our homes? Not very many. You gotta earn trust. And how do you earn trust when we've had almost 9 months with FEMA? And now, at the end, you're asking, well, just trust us. This last time, one more time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ray Herrera?
That was easy. Yes, I want to talk about some things that you folks, hello FEMA, little eye contact. Okay, you folks may not be aware of. This is a long trip. This is like taking a jog. And if you don't look to where you're going to place your next step, there may be an open manhole that you don't know about. Okay, there's a lot of open manholes in your process. And the process stinks in several ways. Number one, the cost of materials to rebuild has increased anywhere from 40 to 800%. Okay? Now, cost per square foot to rebuild. Rebuild when? Now? Next week? 2 years from now? 5 years from now? The mountain behind my house, which is home to the Santa Fe National Forest, slid 16 feet. Nobody can tell me, when do I get a green light to tell me if I can rebuild? The Corps of Engineers came up and said, do this, do that, put wattles, do this, do that. We guarantee you this mountain will not move. Bull feathers. It moved 16 feet the very next day. Nobody can tell me, Okay, I, as an agency, I'm gonna be responsible to tell you when you got a green light. You don't build a house on shifting sand. We're looking to rebuild maybe on a mudslide. You just don't do that. Cost of materials. Let's see, what else I have? How many minutes? Oh, yeah, I had other things. The thing of it is, somebody, because we're still getting this finger pointing stuff. And I can't tell you how unsettling that is when you go to USDA. They say, go across the street. You go across the street, they say, who sent you here? Oh no, we don't do that. God damn it. Sorry, but that's not the way you do business. That's not the way you make us whole. And I look at my math books and I don't see any number in there for making them whole. My hat's off to Hector Balderas and those folks have finally said complete restitution. Let's do it. That's what's called, and I talked about it before, doing it right, doing the right things for the right reasons. Okay, I even brought my contractor who built my home down from Colorado to attest, since he's been through three similar scar burn experiences. He knows the problems they encounter. I say, am I full of beans or what? You're saying $148 a square foot. That guy says da. This one says, you know what it is now? It's in excess of $548 a square foot. And it can go, listen, you heard this here, it can go as high as $1,200 a square foot. So that's bull.
Thank you. Gerald Singleton.
Thank you. My name is Jerry Singleton. I'm an attorney. I've spent the last 15 years representing people who are the victims of fires. And I have to say, the sentiments that I've heard expressed by the last gentleman here, by Kathy before that, are very commonplace. This is something that a lot of people go through. And really addressing the issue of trust, I think one of the things that FEMA can do in that area, and I know you're working very hard, would be to hire local attorneys and people from New Mexico, retired judges, people that know New Mexico law, people that know what the cost is to build, people that can make those evaluations. One of the concerning things about looking at the temporary regulations is that when you look at the appellate process, it doesn't lay out in any kind of detail what that's going to look like. For example, are the arbitrators going to be attorneys? Are they going to be New Mexico attorneys? Are they going to know anything about the law? One of the concerns we have is that when we look at the bill, it says very clearly in section C that the damages must be calculated according to New Mexico law. And yet we have two areas where the regulations are directly contrary to New Mexico law. New Mexico law clearly allows you to recover non-economic damages, the pain and suffering, the anguish that all of these people have gone through. That is black letter law. We submitted as part of our comment, it was a letter that I signed, that Joe signed, that Brett signed, 20 attorneys who represent thousands of people in these fires signed this letter, and we said, please look at this memo that was prepared by the former Chief Justice of the New Mexico Supreme Court, Vern Payne, laying out in detail why it is that non-economic damages are recoverable. That is clear in New Mexico law, and yet they are not recoverable under the regulations. That violates both the bill itself and New Mexico law. And then we get to the 25% cap. There is nothing in New Mexico law that justifies that. It is directly contrary to New Mexico law. The way to determine it is not to look at what the pre-fire value is and take some arbitrary number, be it 25%, be it 50%, be it 75%. The way to do it under the law is to get arborists, to get erosion experts to come in and look at what it will cost to actually remediate it. Those are the types of things that are absent from the regulations, and I think it would go a long way toward restoring trust if we had people who understood New Mexico law and who the people in the community had confidence in, who were involved in drafting these regulations and administering the program. Thank you very much.
Mike Herrera?
Hi, my name is Mike Byrne, and I traveled here from Longmont, Colorado. Amongst a vehicle that was on, it's not a Slade, it's a 19 Chevy's truck, but it had a bunch of coats. Anyway, I got another car to get down here for this meeting. And I've been a builder for over 40 years. I've seen a lot of stuff that has transpired with fires. Perfect example is the Marshall Fire that just recognized its 1-year anniversary. It took FEMA 6 months to decide who was going to take care of all the cleanup. They just now started building the first home. And of course, there's the battle with insurance, with FEMA approving so much. And it's the usual, unless you overinsure, you're out of pocket. And a lot of people can't do this. I mean, Boulder County is a wealthy county, but it doesn't matter your wealth. It's what it costs to rebuild. And we all saw this, perfect example, during COVID. Me as a contractor, I watched a piece of OSB go from $16 a sheet to $70 a sheet. How do I justify that cost to my customer? You know, you have to stipulate in the contract, this price is only good for 30 days. This price is going to go up. Luckily, prices have come back down, but how can you stipulate that you've got 130 days, 160, whatever it is, and your hands are tied? This is what you agreed to, but guess what? You're not going to get that home rebuilt for you anywhere from 1 to 5 years from now. So, if you're going to rebuild your home, it's a 3,000 square foot home at $750,000, and then all of a sudden 5 years down the road, you got to sell for a 1,500 square foot house at that same value to replace it. This doesn't make sense, so I don't see why FEMA has the right to tie your hands to when there's nobody out there. I mean, nobody wants to work in today's world. These contractors can't find employees to come out and do these jobs. I'm a perfect example of it. I mean, I've had people tell me, Mike, things are booming, you need to get a second crew going. I was like, no, I can't, because I cannot find reliable people. I mean, we're really quick to send money across the pond or across the ocean, but we can't take care of our people right here that are in need. And everybody knows what I'm talking about. We don't put politics into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Gilbert Quintana?
Thank you. For the record, my name is Gilbert Quintana, born in Tromperos, New Mexico, in Agua Negra, a village that none of you probably know of because it's listed as home in New Mexico. And the rest is history, okay? I do have some concerns. I heard the concept of this progressive legislation is very different. It's made to meet the tailored needs of the people. I wonder how tailored it's going to be to meet the needs of the people. I heard this young lady here talk about trust. That's critical for trust to be rebuilt through FEMA, because many of us, when we first fled these areas, very difficult time. We were met with people at these rescue centers, FEMA, saying you got to go to your insurance company first, okay? And for those of us who do have insurance, we went to our insurance company. Now, what's that going to do to my premium? They didn't reimburse everything I lost. It's very difficult to understand where an agency that's here to represent us with a new law with $3.95 billion is really going to represent and build that trust. Because I was told by this same organization to go to them, and now I'm going to have repercussions even with my insurance company. And many of my friends and relatives and neighbors do not have that convenience for them. I am very concerned about the psychological trauma. In 1966, I was ordered to go to a war that was not worth it. Many of my friends and relatives came back, traumatized, got PTSD 30 years later. Katrina kids, 20 years later. Mora kids, more adults, more elderly people, 1 year later, suffering from, 6 months later, suffering from trauma. I mean, this will go on and on and on. This trauma doesn't just take a 2-year period to have its onset. As a professional behaviorist, I know how that works. That has to be reconsidered again. I think it has to be looked at very seriously to the effects of trauma and stress and duress on the people here in Mora and San Miguel County specifically. Physical health issues. There's air pollutants that we don't even see in this room right now that are floating around. We've been breathing them since April, okay? Why don't we have sites set up to test this air quality around here? The same goes for our water. The same goes for our land that we've used to feed our animals with, give water to our animals, eat the consumption of that food. What is that going to do? Is that going to happen 2 years from now that all of a sudden we start having other experiences with our well-being? I think it's very critical that we look at these things. And finally, because I'm running out of time, firewood. We need firewood. I mean, these are things that FEMA could do immediately to help the people and show good trust and good faith for the people of Mora and San Miguel County. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Quintana. Soy yo. Buenas noches, voy a hablar en español. Mi nombre es Nancy Quintana y los comentarios que tengo con respecto a la regulación tienen que ver con la pérdida de propiedad. So, decrease in the value of real property. La regulación dice, o lo que yo entiendo, es que tú puedes reclamar the decrease of your property, the value of your property, until November 14, 2024. Pero lo que entiendo que dice es que si en buena fe estás haciendo un negocio para vender la propiedad. Mora County es ahora zona de inundación, flood zone. Yo entiendo que eso significa que nuestra propiedad ha perdido valor por estar en zona de inundación. O sea, para aquellos que no vamos a vender nuestra propiedad en estos 2 años siguientes, ¿cómo vamos a reclamar la pérdida del valor de nuestra propiedad por el incendio y por las inundaciones? Yo creo que la regulación debe contemplar más de 2 años para poder reclamar esta pérdida. Otro comentario que tengo es con los flooding insurance. La regulación dice que solamente vas a ser compensado por 2 años, ya que no tenías la obligación de tener un flood insurance. Pero nosotros vamos a sufrir por flood insurance por más de 5 años. O sea, 2 años no son suficientes. Y el último, bueno, esta regulación dice que va a compensar a las personas que han sufrido injured person who suffered an injury as a result of the fire and sustaining damage to receive compensation under the act. But hay una cosa que me llama mucho la atención en esta regulación, y es que dice que se va a compensar a todas las organizaciones de caridad que vinieron a ayudar a las personas que sufrieron con este incendio. Me pregunto
Si no hay otros programas que puedan compensar a estas organizaciones por la ayuda que le dieron a las personas de Mora, porque 3.9 billions is a lot money, but we have a lot loss. Thank you.
Gracias. Juan Romero?
Could somebody recap and translate what she said? Just a few points in English?
I will do my best. I just took little notes.
Okay, thank you.
If I understand correctly, the lady has some comments about the value of the property and how it's going to be the claim if the reimbursement, if it's only going to be if you are going to fix your property for selling it. So there's a connection with the business. Then also she indicated that the 2 years to do the claim might be too short because might not be possible to get all the information and all the results by the time in 2 years. It's too short the window. Same for the flood insurance. I think you indicated that 2 years to pay for that is just too small money because the flood is going to be affecting 5 more years. So there's going to be more time for the flood insurance to help. And lastly, she indicated that she's wondering what kind of funding can be reimbursed to those charity, I'm guessing ONGOs, organizations that came to support the claims, they can support the fire, and how can they be reimbursed for that support at that time?
Okay, thank you.
More or less.
I think the question was, why should they be reimbursed? They were here doing volunteering work and now they're going to ask for compensation.
Okay, thank you. John Romero. Okay, we'll go back. I like Adana Burgess.
Ayla.
Oh.
Hello. My name is Ayla Jarvis, and I'm set to inherit property here in Encinal Canyon from my, from my father, right here, Dana Jarvis. So I have a concern, here that's in the Federal Register under the interim final rule set November 14th, section 29621, under allowable damages. It says that in paragraph C3 is intended to implement section 104D4A II of the Act, which authorizes FEMA to pay otherwise uncompensated damages resulting from the Hermit'S Canyon fire for a decrease in value of real property. So it says to be awarded compensatory damages, paragraph C3 requires the claimant to either sell the real property in good faith, arm's length transaction that closes no later than November 14, 2024, and the claimant realizes the loss in the pre-fire value, or the claimant can establish that the real property value is permanently diminished as a result of the fire. So I'd like to request that word permanent be removed because of the fact I don't understand how you could establish permanent loss in value when it is something that along the way we should, because we've had an 85% decrease in our property value since the fire, from property that was sold previous to the fire right next to ours and property that was sold after. And it's, yeah, I'd like to ask for non-permanent compensation and immediate compensation for the decrease in property value. The other thing is I'd like to ask for attorney fees should be covered in full to help with the claims process for those especially that are elderly, handicapped, and those with basic literacy skills that don't have the ability to file the claims process themselves, that the attorney fees should not come out of the final claim, that should be added on top of it. I'd also like to figure out how we have 1 year, like it's more than a year, so you have 150 days plus 180 days plus 120 days, so it's more than a year without compensation. How are we expected to rebuild the house, fix the road, and live up there without any funds? My dad was retired and lived up there without any, he didn't have to pay anything, but now he has to live in Santa Fe, pay money, and then we have to pay gas every time we come to one of these meetings or go up there to meet an appraiser. So the last thing I'd like to address is The costs should definitely be covered for their appraisals. The contractors, arborists, and any third-party use to establish the scope of work, land value loss, cleanup costs, tree loss, etc. So please remove the sentence where it says if requested by the claims office, because it shouldn't be if, it should be an automatic reimbursement for any outside person that we use to establish our proof of loss. Thank you.
Roger Chavez. Brett Phelps.
Hi, thank you all for coming out here to hear us tonight. My name is Brett Phelps. I am a Mora resident, was evacuated. Thankfully, our place was spared, but I'm also an attorney who's representing many people who have suffered a lot of damages. And first, I just want to reiterate what everyone else has said. I think these are all important comments. And there's New Mexico law to back this up. You say that these regulations are based on New Mexico law, and I'd specifically like to point to the Court of Appeals opinion, Maestas v. Medina from 2011, when our New Mexico Court of Appeals emphasized the principle that the theory of damages is founded on the principle of making the injured party whole. In computing damages, the fact finder is not held to an inflexible or precise standard. The object is to afford just and reasonable compensation for injuries sustained. So any kind of limits that y'all are putting, any of these strict limits are not in accordance with New Mexico law. They're not following what you're supposed to do under the bill, what you've said you're supposed to do under the regulations. The goal here, what you've said you came here to do, is to make people whole. And the way that these regulations are reading right now is not going to do that for many, many people. So I would just encourage you to listen to what these people are saying and make these changes to help compensate these people who have suffered tremendously. Thank you.
Max Garcia.
Thank you again for the opportunity to comment. And thank you, Ned, Angela, and we've talked before. And I also appreciate the fact that you're giving us the courtesy of giving translation to what you guys are presenting as well. So that is very much appreciated from my standpoint, and I'm sure a lot of folks feel the same way. Anyways, we talked previously about the 25%. And now we get more definition. But I feel that we need the values quantified and qualified. If any schedules are developed with respect to any of that, how that is arrived at, we would like that developed within the comment period of the regulation, not afterwards. So we would appreciate comment on that. And as far as making it mandatory to apply for other federal government resources, I've talked to the Farm Service Agency, National Natural Resources Conservation Agency, and they've got severe backlog. They don't know, there's so much going on that they don't know which end is up. They're having a difficult time. So my recommendation is that applying for those other federal programs, federal grants, should not be a condition by FEMA as far as compensation for all of us that suffered losses. So please don't make it a condition that we apply for and qualify or apply for those other federal programs. We should be compensated for our loss completely. If we want to apply through those other federal programs, we can do so on our own. Another thing is, I feel that let's not wait much longer to get compensated for our loss. There's a lot of us that are having a difficult time and are hurting. I feel that something should be done to develop an estimate. If you look at the loss that each individual person has incurred, look at the loss, develop a reasonable estimate as far as what the loss is, and provide assistance as soon as possible. And then you can go through the full claim process and definitize the rest of the amount. And we need transparency, full and open involvement, and a level playing field and consistency in award compensation, regardless of whether we hire an attorney or not. So level the playing field. If a lot of us can't hire an attorney, please, and somebody else can afford to hire an attorney, level the playing field and make it level for all of us.
Gracias.
Thank you very much.
Gracias. Taylor Buick? I'm sorry about the last name.
All right, Bowie. My name is Taylor Bowie. I'm from the New Mexico Attorney General's office. The new Attorney General, Raul Torres. He shares many of your concerns and is committed to bringing them forward. He's very concerned about what he's been hearing and making sure that the claims office, that the folks in the office, that the process reflects our people and our laws. He's very concerned about the non-economic damages. He's very concerned about making sure that everyone in this community is not just made whole, but make sure that all their losses are recovered and everyone gets their due. So he's continuing to advocate for our communities with his conversations with FEMA, and we'll keep bringing those forward. So not only are comments being made there, but we'll be taking your comments and using them to reinforce our position in our positions and negotiations as well. So I appreciate everyone who's coming out and making these comments. I encourage the community to continue doing so, and know that the Attorney General's office has got your back going forward through all this process. Thank you.
Joseph Diego?
My name is Joseph Guerrero. I'm a community member. I think one of the things that needs to be considered is the insurance issue. There's conversation that it's 2 years, but yet the experts are saying that it's a 5-year floods area. And if you look at the burn scar and you look at where they're identifying the flooding area, it has to be compensated for and covered for 5 years for everybody who lives there, not just individuals that got burned, because the flood is now affecting everybody, or potentially will affect everybody. And to say unless you can demonstrate that you were in a burn area to get compensation for the insurance, that should be covered for everybody. Based on, and not for a 2-year period, but a 5-year period, based on the experts from FEMA saying this is a 5-year issue. I think the other thing that needs to happen is, I know you spoke in regards to the 25% of the tree loss, but we adopted something or looked at the Cerro Grande fire, which in their case, their trees were landscaped. In this case, it's revenue, it's a way of life. That has to be compensated. And we had the Congresswoman Ledger here, and she said that compensation would be at 100%. And I understand that she's a politician, but 100%, and she went on record to say that compensation had to go out 30 years until the trees return. Because if you compensate for 5 years based on that's when the flooding will end, we still don't get the compensation back for those people who depend on the trees for life in regards to wood, for Christmas tree, for heat, for their livelihood. And so 5 years doesn't cover it, and it will not cover it. So that has to be extended out to ensure that the people here that depend on that for a livelihood is guaranteed that. The other piece is the issue with contracts. So we have a lot of local contractors working here. We have local contractors working. We have the majority of them not working. And that's another FEMA issue. Massive contracts went out. The Mora people or Mora contractors are being subcontracted. They're not even given the opportunity. That's wages lost. If you're working for a contractor as a subcontractor, you've lost wages. You've lost revenue. And that's another part that FEMA's failed to do and failed to represent the people, yet we had the Congresswoman here say, we're going to make you whole to 100%. We've had the Senator's office say, we're going to make you whole to 100%. But everything that we look at within the legislation in regards to the comments coming from here, and when those are going to come out and be revealed, is it's a percentage. We can't do it 100%. Well, that's not what was told to the people of Mora and San Miguel. In addition to that, the rules, when it finally comes out, I think there has to be a time that it comes out that we, as Mr. Garcia said, to review those so that we can have another opportunity to make comments and that it's not the final rule at the end of the day. Thank you.
Paula Garcia.
Get adjusted here.
Mentioned that the Cerro Grande rules, which were the basis for these rules, are from a very different context. And here, we are land-based people. And this fire ravaged through our communities. And we're a community of farmers, ranchers, loggers. We harvest wood, we harvest medicine. We graze our animals in these mountains. And so our way of life has been severely disrupted. And these rules will have to be significantly edited in order to take into account the different contexts. So to the extent they were based on Cerro Grande, there has to be much more substantive adjustments to account for our land-based people. One of the examples is to, in the definition, subsistence resources should include other natural resource gathering. Also under allowable damages, we think it should add physical infrastructure, including irrigation infrastructure, such as acequia systems. We have also been working with acequias to submit FEMA claims. And so I paid special attention to the requirement in the rules about having to file for FEMA public assistance. But the Act does not require that people apply for FEMA public assistance. This is important because there are some acequias that did not make the deadline, because the FEMA application process was in some ways traumatic. It was burdensome and difficult for people that had already been going through a hard time with the fire. And it's not in the Act to require claimants to apply for FEMA public assistance. It's in the interim draft rule, but it's not in the Act. So we think that the rule as written violates the Act in that regard. With regard to the 2-year time frame, the interim rule has to be adjusted to actually in this case look more like the Cerro Grande rule to allow for the reopening of claims, because we're going to see this flooding for years and years to come. And why would Cerro Grande have that benefit and not the people here, who are land-based people who are even more affected by the disaster? Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Bob Wesley.
Thank you. I'd like to talk to the issue of building trust in the agency. And I think first, as a background, I'd like to say that I've come to understand that there are two FEMAs. There's the FEMA we had for decades that goes to New Orleans every other year. And they operate under a very narrow-minded set of rules, and they're very, compared to the need, minimally funded. And then there's the FEMA that's under the September regulation, or statute. And they have a substantial amount of money, and they're dedicated to a particular purpose, and it's different people with different rules. And so I think that's the first thing to recognize, that here today we have different rules than we had in New Orleans. And as things get going, essentially the face of the FEMA 2 organization is going to be these office claims adjusters, or reviewers, I guess the word. And the trust is going to come from the attitude that you folks inculcate in those claims reviewers. You can have them say, your job is to help the victims get paid. Or on the other hand, you could say, your job is to show why it's going to be difficult to get you paid. And that's going to be the measure of getting you folks trusted. If these people have the attitude of, we are really going to help, we're not here to protect the government. And so that's the point I'd like to make. Thank you.
Mr. and Mrs. Cooper? We'll go next. Mr. Richard Rusker? Oh, what is your name? I'm sorry.
Jodine.
Jodine, last name? Cooper. Okay, Jodine. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jodine Cooper, and I live in Guadalajara. I'm quite frustrated because we've gone to meetings after meetings after meetings, and this just feels like lip service again. At what point are we going to get some traction with changing the interim final rule? I mean, I feel like I just keep going to these meetings, we keep voicing our concerns, and nothing gets done. Nothing changes. Who do we see? Who do we need to talk to get traction on this? 25% being restitution of, like say from our trees, is nothing. It's like taking a 1-inch diameter aspen tree and saying this should suffice for all of our ancient oak trees, for our sequoias. I mean, if you had a sequoia tree and you gave me a 1-inch little aspen tree and tell me that's what you're going to get, that's nothing. It's an affront, it's an insult. Our culture, our land, our timber. This is who we are. This is what this land has been. And to tell me I'm going to get 25% inclusively with the land, the structures, blah, 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 blah. How do we get some traction with this? Because I am tired of going to meetings and we just voice our opinion and nothing changes. These attorneys have voiced their opinions. There's been representatives, there's been groups, there's been community members. Nothing is changing. You've heard from us over and over again. We've submitted our comments, and yet nothing is changing. You're valuing our livelihoods, our land, our culture, on an example that does not even fit who we are and what we had. I'm tired of feeling I have to beg. I'm laughing at the total restoration, that we're going to be compensated 100%. Show me. Show me that you guys have our interests in mind. Show me where you're going to change to provide that for people. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Richard Ruster?
Could you step aside just a little bit so I can see my time? Thank you. My name is Richard Ruster. I live in Cleveland, Mora County. I've spoken 2 other times, and I've focused a lot on this trust issue from a particular point of view, which is how challenging it is for FEMA as an organization with a track record that has been demonstrated over and over again, that it knows how to get to denials, and it knows how to get to turning people down and creating barriers. And that mindset, if it comes here, is going to be a disaster. And so what I've suggested is how important it is to make a radical change in the mindset and the approach of FEMA in this program, at least. And I hear you listening, Angela, and I deeply appreciate that. And I don't mean just this moment, but I mean for everything here. What I want to focus on tonight is my We come from a background of organizational design and culture work, and I'm going to offer a 7-point program for how you can make that radical transformation very quickly. I'll give it to you in writing afterwards. But the basic idea is that first you be very clear about your purpose, your mission, and your value statements, that your purpose is to be a perfect conduit from the act to the people with their needs, and that your job is to deliver maximum fulfillment of that potential. From that point of view, I'm going to suggest 2 more radical thoughts. That you and your team that revisits all of these comments approaches that with the attitude of how to get to yeses instead of nos, which is to say, you're biased to say yes to every suggestion that has come forward, and then to look for how that's the right thing to do. And in thinking that through, it's going to rewire your brains and the organizational brain to start thinking in terms of yeses and inclusion. The second part is the comments that are not related to specific suggestions, but telling you the stories of people who are afraid they don't fit in the boxes, they don't fit in the categories. And that stage of reviewing these, that you use each of these personal stories to expand the container to make it inclusive of what those needs are. Make sure that the regulations and the mindset covers all of these cases. There are a few other points, but those are the more radical thoughts, and I leave them with you with all my best wishes. As I look at it like FEMA has come with 2 strikes against you, the organizational history and then this particular proposal, which is based on Cerro Grande. And that doesn't rebuild trust, but if you come back with what I just suggested, it's a great foundation to rebuild trust. Thank you.
Thank you. Lawrence Gallegos.
My name is Lawrence Gallegos, and I work for the National Latino Farmers and Ranchers, and while I'm not, I don't live in this community, I did grow up in Taos County, the neighboring county, and I also ranched for 30 years in southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. And there's just a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. And the first one has been brought up a couple of times, and you basing the management of, or the process that you're going through on the Cerro Grande fire doesn't make any sense to me, because the Cerro Grande fire was basically in Los Alamos, which is probably the wealthiest county in the state of New Mexico, and the people there, I think probably 100% of them had insurance on their properties. That's not the case here. I think because it's a land grant, and I was the 6th generation that worked a land grant in Courthouse County, Colorado, and there's very many people that don't even have titles to their properties, and so I think that there's you need to make some figure out ways to compensate those people, because they might not even have titles, or wait for the figure out how they can get titles to those so they can actually be compensated for those properties. The other thing is I wanted to mention that, especially because of the flooding and stuff, it's not just in San Miguel and Mora counties that people are being affected. It's downstream from the different streams and rivers are being affected because of the floods. And also in Taos County, some of the fire did go into Taos County, but it wasn't declared a disaster area. But there are several businesses that have been impacted. And so I don't know if those people should be able to be compensated too on their business losses. And the last thing I would like to say is, while I was a permittee in the forests, in the Carson National Forest, but I've talked to Christine Bishop, who is the range specialist on the Santa Fe National Forest, and there are 27 allotments here in the Santa Fe National Forest that are affecting several permittees. And I didn't see any way that those permittees might be able to be compensated and through the Forest Service, or how that was going to be done.
Thank you. Piquet?
Hello, I'm a neighbor of yours from central New Mexico, Pueblitos, and I was traumatized coming up here. You know, and while I listened, you know, it just brought tears in my eyes. And the trauma was what I saw around you and how you must have felt when you saw the fire coming over the mountain. It's devastating. But be encouraged, because the country is watching. All over the United States is watching to see how you're going to be treated. You know, we have a legislative group in Washington that is fighting for you. So they're up there, but they're coming down here. Take full advantage, let your voices be heard, say something. When we got flooded out in Pueblitos, because we're a small community, we had no help. So we had to figure it out neighbor to neighbor. Some neighbors came back, and a lot didn't. We had no resources. So take full advantage. You know, whatever you have to say it, because it's part of a federal record. And those federal records are going to get reviewed. So be encouraged, but be aware that we're going to fight with you. We're going to be with you. At National Latino Farmers and Ranchers, our motto is preserve, protect, and serve. That's what we do all over the country. Every time there's a flood, every time there's a massive weather event, FEMA is to come out now. So they're understaffed. But here, there's a big difference because the appropriations that our legislators have fought to get something in place. So if you got something to work with. And I'm saying that, like, our flood was in 2017, and I still haven't recovered. You know, you look around, there's things that you lose. The land is going to take at least 5 years to remediate. These are knowledgeable things the USDA knows. But there is a changing attitude, and we see it. So your comments, you know, and you're coming to these meetings or a demonstration, and you care about yourselves. You know, they're not going to chase you off. And those of us that you don't even see, that are going to be invisible soldiers behind you, I'm one of them. These brothers up here that are with me, we're a part of that. We're going to fight. We need to know. And you have some very talented individuals who are amongst you. One of them is a guy named Ron Ortega. You know, he lives here, he loves you, and he works with us to do whatever we can to be those soldiers behind you that you need.
Jaime Chavez.
Buenas noches. Yo también soy de una Merced, la Merced de Atrisco en Centro, Nuevo México, y también de las acequias. And I just want to, because of the people that are in this room that come from this historical landscape, this historical place, we've been told that we have a 2-year window for recovery. Regeneración, I think, is the word, the term. Regeneration. How are you going to regenerate? And then limiting it to trees and stuff. I mean, you got to look at the whole vegetation. You You gotta look at the soils. You're telling me there's runoff, there's erosion, you know, there's you know, ash from the fire in the water. And headwaters protection from floods, and you know, what is the plan? And I heard that there's a lack of inter-agency cooperation with a lot of people who are doing similar things, like the USDA and NRCS, the former Soil Service of the United States Department of Agriculture. And then I have to look, somebody said a central clearinghouse. That means that you on the ground have to organize yourselves. And you're already organized, because you're organized by water, you're organized by familia, and you're organized by comunidad. How are you going to keep your farm and ranch operations going? Because you have to deal with the losses, calculating these losses. It really reminds me that to the acequias and to the land grants, the need of nuestra sociedad mutua. Ever heard of that? Mutual aid society. I mean, when a neighbor's roof comes down, you know, you all have to get together and put it up. And that's how you all responded to this fire, I think. Como vecinos, como gente de la tierra. It's good to get these monies in place for the next 2 years, but it coincides with the overall government rollout, okay, of monies with regard to infrastructures and what we need to do to protect our food security, our food systems, because that's what this is as well. Okay, it's an entire, you know, ecology, if you will. An ecology that needs to be preserved and be protected. And it's also a treaty, these are treaty communities as well. Okay, we can seem to forget that, right? That it's supposed to really go above, you know, the US Congress and what have you. This is an international question. And it's a question that is on the laps of our people right now. But we have to find genuine solutions. Thank you.
Clarence Garcia.
My comment is because we applied for individual assistance from FEMA for damages to our home. I've been put off every time for the reason as to our adjusters. I've had about 10 adjusters that are supposed to go check the damages on our property, and no one showed up. There was one gentleman that called up and said that we made an appointment for Tuesday morning. Monday he called me up and he said that FEMA had sent him someplace else so he could come by the house to do his adjustment. And finally, an adjuster out of California that worked for FEMA said, we're going to do it by FaceTime. Do you have a phone that we could do this adjustment on FaceTime? So I said, yes, I can. What time do you want to meet? So we did meet, and I had to go around the property and everything, showing him the damages on FaceTime. I still got a notice that I wasn't accepted because there was never an adjustment made. Another time at my aunt's house, there was 2 adjusters that went by there to do her adjustment. I happened to be there at my aunt's house, and I told the 2 adjusters, well, I just live up the road here, quarter of a mile from her. And he says, we can't do it. I said, well, you're here already, save you a trip. And he says, no, we can't do it. Well, the reason is FEMA has to assign somebody. So that's my comment today. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last person on the list is Leticia Chavez Polet.
Hello, good evening. It's me again. I'm Leticia with Lifeline Training Institute. I'm a crisis counselor, and we are here to help you find other resources when you're getting denied or you're just having a hard time. We want to help those people that are computer illiterate or they're having a hard time just managing the system. So if you know anybody, please give me their name and number, and we'll call them, we'll reach out to them. And we have a local certified peer support worker that will also reach out. So I'm here to help I'm not with the government, and I need your name and number in order to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your comments tonight. Again, because of the number of comments that we had, we're not going to have additional time to take any more verbal comments here. If you have another comment that you'd like to make, there will be another meeting that Angie will speak to in a minute, or you can provide that comment online. We do have the information up here on the slide and in your handouts for where to provide those written comments.